Hey there, deep divers. Today, we're switching gears a bit for a deep dive into the spiritual armor, Preparing for the Battle Ahead by Bishop Joshua Bowie Sr. It seems like you're looking for practical guidance on handling life's curveballs, but maybe with a faith-based approach. And you know what? Sometimes it's cool to shake things up a bit.
Absolutely. And this book really resonated with me. It's not just another theoretical guide. It's about equipping yourself for those everyday struggles we all face, work deadlines, relationship issues, even that inner voice that likes to second-guess everything.
Okay, let's unpack this armor of God piece by piece. But first, I gotta know, what's the deal with the author? I always find that knowing a bit about the author's background can really add another layer to their work.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And Bishop Bowie's story is pretty fascinating. The guy went from feeling invincible at 18 to facing some serious challenges just a couple of years later. That's when he really dove into his faith and eventually became a leader in his church community.
So he's not just preaching from some ivory tower, he's actually lived through the stuff he writes about. That adds a whole different level of credibility, don't you think?
100%.
Yeah.
It's like he gets it. And that makes his advice on building resilience
Mhm.
that much more powerful. Speaking of, let's dive into that armor. First up is the belt of truth. And honestly, this one is so relevant, even outside a purely faith-based context.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. It's not just about being honest for the sake of it, right?
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with your values. Like imagine you're in a tough negotiation and you're being pressured to compromise your principles. If you're firmly rooted in your own truth, in what you believe in, you're way less likely to cave. It's about having that inner strength to stand your ground, which is such a powerful tool in any challenging situation.
I love how this book takes what could be a vague concept like truth and gives you a framework for actually putting it into practice.
Totally. And the book even gets into some surprisingly practical tips, like being upfront about your values, seeking feedback to stay on track, and using scripture for self-reflection. But honestly, even if you're not coming from a religious perspective, you can still apply those principles. Think of scripture as a framework for self-reflection. The key is getting real with yourself, not just trying to be perfect all the time.
Which brings us to the next piece, the breastplate of righteousness. Now, before we get too caught up in the word righteousness, because let's be real, it can sound a little intense, what does it actually mean in this context?
Right. It's not about being some kind of saint. It's more about self-awareness and striving to live a life that reflects your values. Think of it like this. When you're comfortable with who you are and what you stand for, it's like wearing a protective layer against negativity and criticism.
Mm.
It builds that inner confidence that helps you weather those inevitable storms.
Okay, that makes so much more sense. So it's about recognizing your own worth and striving to be your best self, but not beating yourself up over every little imperfection. I can get behind that. Now, this next piece has me intrigued, and I'm hoping it's as comfy as it sounds, the shoes of the gospel of peace.
I know, right? I was picturing some seriously comfy footwear for this spiritual journey. But as you might have guessed, it's not about the actual shoes.
Okay, so walk me through this one. What's the deeper meaning?
Imagine facing a stressful deadline at work. Everything feels chaotic, right? But when you have that inner peace, that sense of calm amidst the storm, you're less likely to get frazzled and make rash decisions. You can think clearly, stay focused, and ultimately make better choices. It's about finding that steady ground within yourself.
So it's about that inner grounding, that feeling of being centered even when everything around you feels chaotic. Kind of like having those shoes that keep you steady on your feet, even on rocky terrain. I like it. All right, what's next in our spiritual wardrobe?
Next, we have the shield of faith. And I know for some, the word faith can feel a little abstract, maybe even a little too religious. But the way Bowie presents it, it's surprisingly practical.
Yeah, for me, faith has always been more about trust. Trusting in something bigger than yourself, even when you can't see the whole picture.
Exactly. And the book does a great job of breaking down how to actually build that trust. It's not about blind faith. It's about creating a strong internal foundation.
So how do you actually do that? What are some of the building blocks?
Well, he talks about studying scripture, which, again, even if you're not coming from a religious background, you can think of as engaging with any kind of wisdom tradition that resonates with you, whether it's philosophy, poetry, or even self-help books. It's about finding sources of inspiration and guidance that speak to you on a deeper level.
It's like building up a mental library of wisdom that you can draw on when you're facing those inevitable challenges.
Exactly. And he also talks about the importance of remembering past successes. Those times when you overcame obstacles and came out stronger on the other side.
Oh, I love that. It's like giving yourself credit for how far you've come and acknowledging your own strength. Because let's be real, we all have those moments where we doubt ourselves.
Absolutely. And then there's the power of gratitude, which honestly I think is so underrated. When you focus on the good stuff, even the small stuff, it shifts your whole perspective.
It's like creating a mental shield against negativity. Right. You're literally focusing your mind on what's positive and uplifting.
Exactly. And the final piece of the puzzle is the importance of community. You don't have to go through this alone.
That's huge. I mean, we all need that support system, those people who get us and can offer encouragement when we need it most.
Exactly. It's about surrounding yourself with people who lift you up and inspire you to be your best self. And that reminds me, another piece of armor we haven't gotten to yet, the helmet of salvation.
Okay, this one sounds intense. Are we talking about a literal helmet here?
Not quite. It's about protecting your mind, but not in a physical sense. It's about shielding yourself from those negative thoughts and self-doubt that can really hold you back.
You know how sometimes that little voice in your head tells you you're not good enough or you're going to fail? We all have that voice to some extent.
Exactly. And the book argues that learning to quiet that voice and cultivate a strong sense of self-worth is crucial for overcoming challenges. It's like building a mental fortress that can withstand those negative attacks.
So, how do we silence that inner critic? What are some practical strategies?
Well, the book talks about the importance of affirming your own worth, of recognizing your strengths and accomplishments. It's about challenging those negative thought patterns and replacing them with positive, empowering beliefs.
It's like retraining your brain to focus on the good stuff instead of dwelling on the negative. I'm picking up on a theme here. It's amazing how much of this comes down to mindset.
Right. And the final piece of the armor, the sword of the spirit, really ties into that.
Okay, so we've got our belt, our breastplate, our shoes, our shield, and our helmet. Now we're armed with a sword. This sounds like we're ready for battle.
Well, remember, this is all metaphorical. The sword of the spirit isn't about attacking others. It's about using knowledge, and in this case, he specifically mentioned scripture, to dismantle those negative thoughts and limiting beliefs that can hold you back.
So it's like a weaponized form of self-reflection. You're taking those truths you've learned and using them to combat your own inner critic.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting about this whole armor analogy? It's not about becoming some kind of unbeatable warrior who never struggles. It's about building that resilience to navigate those challenges, to get back up when you fall down.
It's like we all face those battles, right? Both internal and external. But it's how we equip ourselves to handle them that makes all the difference.
Right. And what really resonated with me is how Bowie emphasizes this isn't a one-time thing, like you just put on the armor and you're good to go.
Yeah.
He talks about the importance of maintenance, of constantly
Yeah.
checking in with yourself and making sure your actions are still aligned with your values.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of deal.
Yay.
It's a continual process of self-reflection and growth.
Exactly. It's about consistently nurturing your own inner strength and resilience. And, you know, he even talks about the power of prayer as a way to recharge and reconnect with that inner strength. But even if you're not someone who prays, you can still apply that concept. Think of it as taking that time for quiet reflection, for connecting with something bigger than yourself, whether that's nature, art, music, whatever resonates with you.
It's about carving out that space for yourself to recharge and refocus. Because, let's be real, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? We have to prioritize our own well-being so we can show up as our best selves in the world.
100%. And, you know, as we're wrapping up here, something I keep coming back to is how surprisingly relevant this book is, even if you're not approaching it from a purely faith-based perspective.
Right. I have to admit I was a bit skeptical going into this deep dive, just because it's not typically the kind of material I gravitate towards, but I'm actually blown away by how practical and applicable it is.
Me too. And I think that speaks to the power of metaphor. This whole idea of spiritual armor is something we can all connect with on some level. We all have those battles we're fighting, those challenges we're trying to overcome. And this book gives us a framework for doing that with more intention and resilience.
Absolutely. It's like having a toolkit for navigating life's inevitable ups and downs. So, as we leave our listeners to ponder this, if you had to pick one piece of this armor to focus on, just one to start strengthening today, what would it be?
Ooh, that's tough. But, you know, I think I'd go with the shoes of the gospel of peace. Because when you have that inner peace, that sense of calm and groundedness, it makes facing those challenges so much easier.
It's like having that solid foundation to stand on no matter what life throws your way. Love it. Well, deep divers, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and maybe even inspired you to approach your own battles with a little more courage and resilience.
Remember, you've got this.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.